tempo. All the while the officials raking in. Trouble is deep and men and the Calypsonian. Scrunting after carnival done. And yet still we keep on jamming. Every year we come out playing Calypsonian and deep and east, west, north and south. From every part of this island we make our contribution. Don't leave us out. Remember we are the ones who make you jump, who make you jump up and prance. We're in the middle of the carnival. We are the ones keep up the bacchanal. We are the ones who make you jump up and prance. Working to make this fun and secret. Greatest summer festivity, and yet we treated Calypsonians and pan like dirt. All you we weren't.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to We Are the One. First, let me apologize. Totally due to circumstances beyond my control. My guests are on their way, and that is the main reason, in fact, why we are having a delayed start. Today, we are to be joined by Mr. Darwin Telemac, the General Manager of the Antigua and Barbuda Port Authority. He just indicated he'll be here shortly. He was just wrapping up a meeting and sends his apologies. Also, Mr. Jason Roberts, the Security Officer, and Mr. Dennis, who is the Operations Manager, along with a few other persons. Yes, we are supposed to be having a packed house. And the objective of today is to discuss the redevelopment of the St. John's Harbour. As many of us are aware, that the government has signed off with the Chinese on a $90+ million loan to redevelop the St. John's Harbour. The precise scope of work is one of the things that we are going to be discussing today, along with many of you may be aware, I'm not sure if everyone is, that there's also been some relocation in terms of the administrative offices at the port, in terms of a lot of the shipping agents and the functions that they undertake at the port. There are a number of changes that have begun and will continue over the life of the project. And so we're going to take this opportunity today to share quite a bit of that information through my guests who should be here shortly. And we will be talking about the whole issue of the port redevelopment. And also there's a very important element as well that we will also be addressing, which would be the impact on the community. And that is important because as many of the persons from Point and Villa in particular would be aware that the Dredge Bay playfield, which has been in use for an extended period of time in the community as the main playfield, is now actually the home of the administrative offices of the Antigua Port Authority. And so there are some logistical challenges that are being addressed, and the critical question becomes what will happen once the new port facilities are done, and in terms of the return of the Dredge Bay playfield to its rightful position as a recreational facility. In that regard, there will be a town hall meeting at Villa Primary School on September the 27th. That too, I'm anticipating that the team from the Port Authority will be able to update us on once they are sitting in the chair. And we will then be able to get some additional information with regards to where we are. I think I'm now getting a message about an update as from Mr. Telemac, which I will check on shortly. But I just want to continue to share with my audience a number of things, which would include that there has been continuous stakeholders meetings based on my discussions with Mr. Telemac, which has covered issues such as the evolving role of the shipping agents. Yes, our shipping agencies are going to be playing a improved, stronger, critical role in the whole business of how you do business with the Antigua Port Authority and the clearance of your goods. Also, just to let us know that there are a number of persons that have been engaged in the management process of this entire project, which includes one, Mr. Everett Zachariah. We know Mr. Zachariah, engineer, who is the project manager on behalf of the people of Antigua, people and the government of Antigua and Barbuda. And we also have Mr. Shabazz, who is the government liaison officer between the Chinese construction company and the project. And there are also issues relating to quality assurance. We would recall that there have been a number of challenges, various challenges, with a number of projects, large projects throughout the region, in particular the Bahamas. And so the Chinese have upped their game in terms of ensuring quality assurance and added a new layer in terms of how they will administer projects such as these. Of course, we'd also be very, very concerned about the availability and prospects for jobs for citizens and residents of Antigua and Barbuda. And that's another issue that I'm hoping that we will be able to address in a timely manner once our guests are here. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned into, and thank you for tuning in to We Are the Ones today, Wednesday, as usual, Wednesday, 12th September. Of course, we are watching out, and my guests are here. They're coming in, and we are also keeping an eye on the weather. We know that tropical storm weather conditions are expected in some parts of our Leeward Islands, but we are not anticipating having that type of weather. Of course, our thoughts and prayers and everything are with our people further down south. You know, they're one of us, our Dominican friends and colleagues. Many of us have friends and relatives in that area. So we just want to send our warmest regards and best wishes to them and hope that the wind shear continues. And so by the time it hits them, they will get some rain that will help to continue to spur the growth and the return of the agricultural sector so that the economy can continue to thrive and grow. So with those introductory words, I am being joined in a few minutes by Mr. Telemak, the General Manager of the Port Authority. He has been with us before, and he was very insightful and provided us with lots of very important information about the port and the port operations and where we were heading at that time with the project. He's back with us today, and we are now getting well ready. In fact, work has commenced. Shortly, we will be uploading some of the photos of the work that has already begun, so that persons, those of us who are joining us via Facebook, can actually see those photos. We'll be uploading some photos that you can see. For those of you who are familiar with my page, the Spectator page, you can go on and you will see some photos there already. And so where we are now is that the project to redevelop the St. John's Harbour has commenced. A large number of the workers from the Chinese construction company are already on the ground. Oh, I'm feeling better. Hi, Jason. A large number of our construction workers from China on the ground. I know work has commenced in terms of our local resources being put to work on the project. And so, as I indicated a few minutes ago, we are being joined today by the port manager, Mr. Telemak, the port operations manager, Mr. Dennis, and Dennis? Denny. Mr. Denny, how I get Dennis? I've been saying Dennis for the whole afternoon. I think I wrote wrong. My apologies. Mr. Curtis Denny. My sincerest apologies, sir. And Jason, what's your last name before I get in trouble? Roberts, right? See, I got that right. And Mr. Jason Roberts, our security officer. Now, Jason, I'm glad you're here. I have to tell you why. Because so far since I've been doing this project, this program, there's only been 3 times when I haven't had somebody from my neighborhood on this program. And this program is titled We're the One. And the key stakeholders for We're the Ones are the people of Point and Villa, whether in the neighborhood, immediately spread out across Antigua, or even in the diaspora, and of course the rest of Antigua and Barbuda. So thank you for allowing me to keep up that great tradition where unless you pass and christen and pick me first, that kind of way. Yeah. All right. So gentlemen, I think you need a Mr. Roberts needs his headphone. Mr. Roberts, right next to you, headphone. So ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to have in studio today, We Are the Ones, 3 members from the management team of the Antigua and Barbuda Port Authority. I will ask them, as I call them, to introduce themselves and just give us a brief overview of their functions at the port. So when they speak, we get a clear appreciation for the perspective from which they are making their presentations. Of course, we begin with Mr. Telemac. Mr. Telemac, good afternoon and welcome again to We Are The Ones.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Petra. And we are very pleased to be here to join you and your listeners to what is emerging as the favorite sound in Antigua, Point FM 99.1. And you guys have been doing a wonderful job. We are very pleased to actually be here, be associated with the radio station. For, among other things, it's in the vicinity of the port. So we have to collaborate with Point FM. And I'm sure over the years, over the next months and years, we should be looking at designing outreaches that would provide the community, the nation with information relative to port activities, and doing so through Point FM. And we hope that the collaborative nature of our relationship can expand, and we can use this platform to highlight the occurrences, the developments, the relevant pieces of information that we need to get out, and that would work out quite well for us. So we're happy to be here. I'm happy to have with me Mr. Denny, the operations manager, and the PFSO, Port Facility Chief Officer.
See, you didn't give me all of that. You just have me saying security manager.
Mr.
Port
Jason
Facility
Ross.
Chief.
Yes.
Jason, you let me call you wrong.
He is
That's fine. Security manager is fine.
yes, and in his responsibility, Mr. Roberts actually oversees all of the port of entries in Antigua, not just the Deepwater Harbor, particularly those that require the controls, international monitoring and controls, as it relates to the ISPS code. And so he has a big job, and has been doing so quite well. So we're happy to be here, and I'm sure as we get more and more involved, we want to broaden the knowledge that we share with the public. And I have these 2 gentlemen who've been working along with me to bring the project up to the level that it is here, highlighting some of the developments that have taken place. So we're happy to engage the public, and I trust that the information would be fruitful and beneficial to those listening.
Mr. Denny, why do I keep... Sorry, let me put it in big and bold. Mr. Denny.
Thank you very much.
Just provide us with a brief overview of what your role as operations manager involves at the port.
Okay, well, let me take the opportunity to express my gratitude for being here, and also to also say a very special welcome to the program to all of the listeners at Point FM. The Port Authority is generally based upon operations, and a vessel that comes to the port triggers or starts the operations at the Port Authority, and that starts from our pilots going out and meet the vessel. That's the physical part, but there's a back part that the public don't really see. So the essence of the port is operations, so that would involve the vessel docking, discharging, and also dealing with warehouse, dealing with customers coming to the port and receiving their containerized cargo, or they receive their less than container load cargo, which is stored in the warehouse. And that is where the public will generally interface with the warehouse and with the yard operations, getting the cargo in and out of the port for import and export.
So you're the man that I really need to complain to or not, Mr. Telemac, if I have an issue.
Well said. Well said, Petra.
Mr. Roberts.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Roberts, it sounds so formal. But you know what? Not because me and Ken grew up together. You know, we're in formal seatings here. Now I have to advise. Give us just an overview. Mr. Telemac, just give us a brief overview, but I'm sure you can add something to what your role is in the whole operations of our main. Well, no, not main, sorry. You are responsible for all ports of entry. Yes, so tell us.
As Mr. Telemann mentioned, I'm pretty much responsible for the ISPS compliance of the certified government ports and also the one private facility in WIAC. My responsibility is everything security. My function hinges on everything Mr. Denny does, because the operations of the port is pretty much the port. So in essence, operation influences my procedures. So I pretty much piggyback on what happens on the operations side. In essence, I'm here to guarantee pretty much the security of the cargo that we're the custodians of until when the customer get it, and pretty much the security of the persons who operate on the port, which includes the employees and the customers alike.
Okay, that's very good. Just one question. When you say ISPS, what do you mean?
It's an acronym. It doesn't really represent everything that it speaks to, but it's the International Ship and Port Facility Security Code.
Okay, and that is something that we need to be international standards.
Yes, it is.
So it involves continuous training, monitoring. How does it work?
Monitoring. In essence, we're certified. Certification is usually for a 5-year period.
Okay.
Prior to the expiration of that, we go through an inspection, assessment for recertification. Throughout the year, we go through internal, not just inspections, but assessments of various aspects of what we call our security plan.
Okay.
And Jason, it would be good if you would just highlight the genesis of that code and what triggered the necessity to have that in place.
Well, it's piggybacking what was done on the aviation side. September 11, unfortunately. Yes, we just celebrated the anniversary.
That came to the sea too?
No, it didn't come to the sea, but
in terms of the impact,
it highlighted the need
okay,
to put specific measures in place. When you look at what could have been done with aircrafts, you can only imagine what could be done with a vessel carrying about 4 times as much passengers, about 10 times as much fuel, and you can just imagine. And for us, that depends so much on tourism, and we pretty much import 95% of what we consume. That gives you an idea how much focus that we need to place on the maritime side of our industry.
Yes, and Petra, the effectiveness of our compliance level highlights the certain attitude that is displayed about our port throughout the world. So if we are maintaining all of the factors of our plan, which we would have to submit, then we appear to be graded very high. Some of the restrictions that exist in the port pertains to that. The entry requirements, the requirements of how you function within the port, both at the cruise terminal and at the cargo terminal, any terminal that is supposed to be functioning under the ISPS. If we maintain all of our guidelines, then that certainly places us in high standing with the authorities. And Mr. Roberts mentioned the inspections that comes in. Sometimes there are surprise inspections. There are inspections that are done without us knowing. There are audits that are performed on short notice. And so we are constantly having to ensure that we are on par with what is required of us. And Mr. Roberts' job is to ensure that every port that requires ISPS compliance is in order. And there's a whole structure behind that, but we won't necessarily get into that right now. But it's a very vital part of what we do.
Just one follow-up question as it relates to that. I was thinking of the business side. So if we meet these standards and we are consistent in terms of our application, does it have any impact on the cost of shipping into Antigua? Any impact on the quality of the cruise passenger ships we would get?
Well,
I know we're here to discuss other things. I just want to ask that question.
There's a very easy answer to that. Where if you don't have those standards, then you see the cost, then you see the impact. Okay. You would have less ships. Ships would not be willing to. They won't feel safe in coming here. If you're blacklisted for not demonstrating a certain level of compliance, then you would certainly lose some benefits. So while you're not going to see a dollar value equated at the point of sale per se, you could have significant challenges if we were to ignore the international requirements. And so far, we've had a very engaging process in that. The port itself is in a very dilapidated state, which it's going through much needed repairs, and that's the fun stuff we want to talk about today. But those challenges continue to plague us. It's continuously ensuring that we have to spend a lot of money, change things, patch things. Now we're going to have a new place with a whole different arrangement, and it's going to be done well. It's going to be one of the ire of the Caribbean. People are going to look at this port and see something extremely wonderful. And the integrated approach we've used in trying to ensure that we arrive there, I think is going to make all Antiguans very, very proud to see the final product.
Okay. So my first question now on our topic. What are we anticipating for this port redevelopment?
Well, that can be answered in many different ways. What I can tell you is we have, for a long time, been discussing the possibility of a new port, the possibility of enhanced service deliveries, the possibility of reducing some of the bottlenecks that exist now, the possibilities of transforming the environment in how we actually deliver those services, and all of those things we anticipate will change. We're going to have a brand new environment. We're going to have a much different environment.
Forgive me. When you say a brand new environment, what do you mean? Are we taking out everything down at the port?
Well, yes, everything is going to change. We will have, for example, I will highlight this for all of the customers and my staff as well. There'll be no more dust in the vicinity. We're now going to have a covered area, and that has the environmental and health concerns has been a challenge for my staff. It's been a challenge for port users. You're walking through the yard and there's a Saharan dust. It's not Saharan dust. It's coming right from the pen, actually, just racing you down, and you have to get your shirt over your face. I see customers and my staff having to do that all the time. That's going to be a thing of the past. That sort of impact is going away. Okay. And I from time to time, both Mr. Denny and Mr. Roberts, would hear some of the staff saying that their eyes hurt and their throat hurts because it's just too much dust. And that's going to go away. So that new environment, I think, will speak to a much better experience at the port if you work there and if you're visiting for business purposes.
Okay. How long are we anticipating this project will take to be constructed?
The entire project should be completed within 3 years. We have some preliminary schedules on what we expect to see happening. By the end of next year or shortly thereafter, we should see the completion of the new warehouse. We should see the completion. We should be coming close to the completion of the admin building by somewhere early in 2020. And so when you look at all of the aspects that needs to be done, and I can just tell you precisely what's going to be done now. First, we're going to have the construction of the admin building, the construction of the new terminal, the new transit shed, You're going to have the construction of the new ro-ro berth, the tug row berth, the carpool, the gates. You're going to have the construction of the new piers, which would be a linear pier that would be extended a little bit east of the location where it's at now, going all the way back west. That will be completed. That's going to be 3 meters south or forward of the current location. So we're going to expand into the sea 3 meters, about 15 feet. So the new bulkhead will be 15 feet from the existing one. It will be backfilled in, and then the new area will be laid over. We're going to have from where the warehouse is, going all the way back to the end, all the way into where the Coast Guard is. That's going to be our new container terminal.
All the way into where the Coast Guard is?
Yes, in the back side.
So they're not likely to remain there?
That's going to be, yes, they are going to move later on.
We can discuss that, right. Mm-hmm.
But so you're going to have a container terminal, a new berth, which would now be able to facilitate 2 fully loaded liner vessels. Right now, we can't necessarily operate 2 liner vessels there because the warehouse takes up so much space right now. But under the new regime, we're going to have enough space to operate 2 cranes at the same time with 2 full mainline vessel ships.
So you're saying that as it is now, if two vessels come, one stays out and wait for you to clear the other one.
Or they could both come in. We could probably berth both of them, but we can only work
one
at a time.
Oh, so we'll now
Yes.
be able to work both.
Right, because the warehouse, based on where the warehouse is, it's very unlikely that we could do that. We've done two ships at once, but we had to use the ship's gear on the second one, and it would land between the ship and the warehouse, which is a very narrow space. So the enhancement we're going to have is that the entire area is now going to be able to facilitate the full operations of two vessels with two cranes. That would create some significant level of competitiveness for the service being provided at the Port Authority of Antigua.
All right. So I get that in terms of now you mentioned the cost.
By the way, I also want to add that there would be a new admin building that would be constructed on the northeastern side between the Food City building and the distilleries. We're going to have the admin building constructed there.
Hold on. Those of us who are familiar with the port
Yes.
are now accustomed to the admin building being down at the bottom.
Yes.
So you're saying now all of that now will be operational space, and the new admin building will be just below where distillery is now, the Oasis water plant is.
Right. Now
Right.
that is when you think of that is really a quantum leap from what was designed in 1968. If you remember, the admin building as we knew it was the cruise ship facility that facilitated access to cruise ships way back then, because the cruise ships came down at the Deepwater Harbor at that time. They would go through that little terminal and they would go to meet the vendors on the north side of that area. So that was the flow. If you look at the new plan, we are moving these activities away from the main container traffic area. They don't need to be that close to the pier. Back then in 1968, you didn't have containers. You needed to keep the warehouse right close to the pier to transfer goods quickly into there. Right now, we can move the transit shed or the warehouse way of the property. We could put it somewhere in Casada Gardens even, because it's easy to pull containers there, unstuff it, and make deliveries. We're moving it eastwards, and frankly, the next
When you say eastwards, just for point of reference, tell me again so I can probably pick it up and share it with my guests.
From where the container, the transit shed is
now
located,
yes,
we're going to move it east towards the Old Bryson's dock.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So as a matter of fact, the area at Bryson's dock, there's an inlet.
Yes.
All right, where water flows in from St. John Street into there.
Mm-hmm.
That entire inlet is going to be backfilled. It will create somewhere in the region of 1.8 acres of land, and the warehouse will start from there going back towards the dirt pen area that we now have.
Hold on. So when you backfill the inlet,
Yes.
because that's taking in water that's running from drains going
Yes.
down there. What's
Yes.
the plan to redirect that? You know what? Don't answer that. I'm going to put that on another sheet. So
No, we have the answer for that. As a
No,
matter
I
of-
know that, but I don't want for you to distract from that. So you go ahead. I will save the question.
All right.
Go ahead.
So basically, we move the warehouse eastwards, but we want to capture the methodology at play here.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to this period, we constructed the warehouse right next to the pier, and that was to transfer loose goods into the warehouse quickly, to ensure that customs taxes and duties could be collected before those packages left the port.
Mm-hmm.
As it stands now, because of containerization, we can move these packages under the same customs control environment up to the warehouse, unstuff it, put it in the warehouse, and customs still works. So with the introduction of containerization, we are now beginning for the first time to actually see the full benefit of containerization, which means that the warehouse, the transit shed, could be moved further and further away from the main berthing area. And if we were thinking way down the road, we could even move it further off the port and put it somewhere inland. And I was about to say that the next bright young port manager from Antigua is going to be looking at that somewhere down the road as we transition to what would be a broader operations, because the market's going to grow, the demand is going to grow for more space, and as that happens, you're going to probably be sitting here a few years down the road thinking, okay, it's time to transition to the next step. So this is a transitionary period, and you're seeing the development playing out right in front of you.
In terms of that development, we know now that our current facilities, which we have outgrown and we're moving out of, also caters for when we have an overflow of cruise ships. Are we going to be including the need to accommodate cruise ships in this scheme, part of the development? And I ask that while I do know that arrangements are being made to add additional berth elsewhere. So even though we're adding additional berth elsewhere, is it still going to be necessary, or is it part of the development plan as it stands now to continue to make room to accommodate tourist ships?
Actually, I think...
Well, passenger ships, let me be clear.
Yes. And nothing beats preparation. I can see you're well prepared. That's a very, very good question. The port will facilitate cruise vessels if it needs to. It's a priority for the marketplace. We all understand that passengers come first, and then we deal with the cargo next. We will have a fifth berth.
At the facility?
No, we will have a fifth
outside?
berth as being constructed.
Right.
However, if we continue to market and promote the industry as we are doing aggressively, we expect to have more vessels. We expect to invite them in here. As we invite them in, if it necessitates that we make arrangements for them to be berthed there, that will be done. The good news about that is they will not be berthing in the dilapidated area that they have been coming into of late. They will now have a brand new facility that they will be much happy to work with. In addition to that, because of the length of berth and the draft that we're now going to be increasing, so the entire dock area that we are expanding to, which would be somewhere in the range of almost 1,500 feet in length, that is all going to be at 12 meters. And that means we could put any size vessel pretty much at any point. It would therefore reason that we could move the cruise vessels further east, away from the container traffic, and facilitate the customers from the cruise vessels off along the southern side of the perimeter, out the gate, and make that nice and smooth. So they would not be necessarily within the heavy container traffic area. They would never be in that space.
Okay,
So
cool.
notwithstanding us not planning to create that sort of traffic there, if it necessitates it, it will be done in a far more organized, clean, and I could even say sterile environment.
I was
Yes.
going to add that word in
Yes.
mind. Okay, so what is the cost that I know the government has borrowed some funds to facilitate this project? Are we anticipating, what's that amount, and are we anticipating that would be sufficient for the project, or does the port have to come up with other funds, or the port or the government, to make sure that this project is completed?
We've borrowed 600 million RMB,
English.
and that equates to.
English, please.
I'm saying it that way for a reason. When we
Are we paying it back in RMB?
Well, actually, when we signed the loan, the conversion at that time was $100 million.
Ouch.
So essentially, we borrowed $100 million US. But with the Chinese yuan actually going up in value, the $100 million has been sort of depleted a little bit. So it's now just around $90 million. So we're hoping that changes in short order, although that might not necessarily happen.
What will change? That we will convert it to a fixed US dollar sum,
No.
or it will continue to be volatile?
We want $100 million. But anyway.
You want 100 million? Because, I mean, that I'm also putting that on another page. That might not be for you, for another
Yes.
question. So essentially, the loan is demarcated in RMB.
Yes.
And it's 600 million RMB.
Yes.
Whatever that converts to is another story.
Right.
But it's RMB. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So you know that. And is it that is sufficient to cover the project, or is the port anticipating having to allocate additional funds, or to have the government cover any part of the work? For example, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, that the demolition and so on are not a part of that project.
The demolition of
The buildings and anything that is
admin
there now, the admin building, any other buildings that are at the facility, any preparatory work that had to be done, those would all be project commencement, and so would not form a part of the 600 RMB.
No,
million.
You're incorrect there. I will go through this so you can get a very good understanding
Perfect.
of where we are.
Thank you.
There are some preparatory works that, with the contract, we had to do to ensure that the Chinese could facilitate the development. One of those things was that we needed to remove ourselves from the area we call Gate 3. So we had to relocate. There was no allowances made under the amount that we borrowed to facilitate the transfer from there to wherever we were going to move to. And therefore, that move was on the Port Authority to do. We have since created a space at Dredge Bay in that old stand, which is now a beautiful office building, which you came into just yesterday.
We will discuss
And
that later.
I think I think that in itself allowed us to quickly vacate the area and be in a space that facilitated a number of things. Number one, when we moved the last time to the Popeset Street area, we moved there, but we had to do some significant changes to our roster. We could not accommodate all the staff, so we had some staff who had to stay home.
I remember that.
Some staff who had to come back. It was really disruptive and something that was not really proper. In this instance, we were able to get a space that would facilitate all the staff, so we have everyone at work. There was a significant challenge we had as well, in that we had to find a location that would allow us to move all the vehicles that we are receiving, and we are receiving a lot of those vehicles. We had to find both. We had to find a space big enough to house the port staff and house the movement of the vehicles. What we were finding was vehicles way off someplace else, port staff someplace else, and the location we were getting for the port staff would still not be able to manage all of us in one space. So luckily, we saw the dilapidated stand, came up with an idea, and today the community now has a beautiful building.
No, the community doesn't have a building. The port has a building.
Yeah, the port has a beautiful
which we will
building.
eventually discuss
Yes.
down the road.
In
But
the-
let's
in-
leave that there for now.
The port has a beautiful building in the community that I think is a much better site, and I think would be put to much better use going on down the road. But that has been at the port's cost. We also had to take up the cost of removing significant numbers of derelict boats, ships that were sunken around the Bryson's Dock area. That's at the Old Point Wharf. We had to move those out. We contracted with Meridian to do so. That took some time, but right now we can say all of those old vessels have been removed.
Have we relocated them to other places so that they can become part of our sea fauna?
Actually, none of those vessels were
good
turned
condition?
into dive sites.
Okay.
We are exploring that right now with the ones that we're taking out over further east at the Heritage Key area.
Okay.
On the north side of Heritage Key. We're exploring that with those. But these were cut up and these were removed from the water and they're scrapped. Some of the scrap companies may have taken them.
Taken them?
We don't know where those are. So we had to deal with those costs. We also had to deal with some of the cost of transferring a number of individuals who were on the site now housed by the Chinese for the campsite. We had to create a campsite for them, and there was some squatters in an area just to the west of where the Dredge Bay field was. We had to relocate these individuals, and we also had to ensure that we facilitated that move by putting them at a location where they could now move out of without delaying the project. We had to do that ourselves as well. There were a number of other items that we had to take onto ourselves that the port.
So these are all in addition to the. So these will basically be pre-project costs.
Yes.
All
yes.
right, okay.
However, I just want to make it clear that the admin building was the first contract signed by CCCC with a local company. They did that with Spencer Heavy Equipment, and I'll tell you, I watched them do that job, and they did an immaculate job there. It was professionally done. When it was all completed, you saw dust on the ground. There was no sign that there was a
Yeah,
building.
I think we have some photos of
Yes.
that. I don't know if we'll be able to share.
There were no steel left. It was so well done. It was unbelievable. They just took the building as if nothing was there, and you had a perfect
Right.
surface. So yes, this is the building, and I might add that the size of steel that we saw in that building don't exist right now. If it does, I don't think anyone uses that size of steel in their construction. They were, I mean, inch and a half or something like that steel throughout the whole building. It was a well constructed building, and Spencer's took that down in quick time. They had 21 days. They met the deadline, and they did a fantastic job.
So what we're looking at now is what's left.
Actually, that's all gone. Nothing is there now. The area is completely clear. It's like you've tiled the ground all over again. That's what it looks like. Those dust and broken up pieces were further broken up to remove the steel. The steel is separated, and the material that left over was used to backfill a gaping hole that we had in the western side of the pier, and they sort of temporarily reconstructed that area, and then they built on the western side revetments with the balance of the material. So that was used back into the environment, and we're grateful that they did that, because
Learning a new word.
yes, if they'd not filled up that hole, for example, and we had storm surge coming from this weather situation that we had, this could further undermine the entire dock area, which would probably create further challenge for us on the seawall on the south side, or maybe go further east into the actual port and create significant challenges for us. So the fact that we could take that material and block that hole, build up a revetment, huge benefit for us. So that was paid for by the Chinese. Most of the other things, we had to do that.
All right, permit me now, Mr. Denny. In terms of our operations at the port, because we mentioned that we moved the admin buildings. How has that move of the admin building and the cars and so forth, just what has been Mr. Telemak explained so far, how has that impacted on the port operations?
Well, one of the things it has done for us is it has given us space, and as Mr. Telemak and Mr. Roberts would tell you, that the advent of this project has really boxed in the Port Authority in terms of our landside operations. We are limited by space, and the scope of the project has really put us in a position where we have to now look to see other locations from which we can store containers. So that space has been identified as an area where we're going to use to store containers, because the current locations that we have,
Which space?
the spaces that we have in the pen,
Okay.
right? Those spaces historically, they've been used to store containers. But from the designs of the Chinese, from what we have seen, they have now significantly restricted us to moving further away from that area. So we are going further west, because
So now in terms of current operations, you'll be moving east, how we go now? East, west.
Let's
We're
establish
moving-
that. Hold on,
okay.
Mr. Denny.
We're moving closer down to the admin building.
Right.
Picture-
Wait a second, Mr.
The old
Just
admin
give
building.
me 30 seconds. Let me just,
Right, the old admin building.
So if someone is now coming to the port in terms of getting their access to their goods, do they still go down to the current
Yes,
facility?
because we have not yet fully utilized and really operationalized that areas
Okay.
yet. But
All
it's
right.
just a planned area for facilitation of the new maximizing the space that we have in the port.
Petra, what I wanted to I want to establish some ground rules here
Right.
for you, so you get it clear. If you're at the roundabout, you're dead east,
Yes.
okay? And if you go straight down the road, you're heading westward. So let's get that.
You never show off that.
No,
man.
no, no.
You never show off
because-
them in another directions. My
no,
heart. I mean, you're right.
No, what we want to do.
Listen carefully.
yes.
You are correct. But let me have a show off.
No. Because we're throwing out east and west, we want to make sure we don't confuse the public.
Agreed.
So if you're at the roundabout, you're east. And if you're heading into the port, you're heading west.
So as it stands now, normally when we come down to the port, we see all the containers stacked up
Right.
closer up to the roundabout.
Right.
When this new operations, as the construction moves forward, the containers will be further west.
Right.
Yes.
See, got it.
Danny, if you can explain what happened to A1, so she gets it.
Currently, we have had, well, I would say for the last couple of years, we have had the agent.
Oh, 1 second. Permit me to welcome my old teacher. I'm sure you don't remember, you used to teach me. But the project manager, remember you used to teach me, sir?
Of course.
Oh, okay, good. Yes, mention my own teacher. We will not discuss how I did in that subject. It's one of the things I talk about. Mr. Zachariah, how are you?
I'm very well.
And you will be the project manager on this operations?
That's correct.
All right, so we're just going to let Mr. Denny finish his point about, and as soon as he's done, I just want you to give an overview of your role in this entire project. All right?
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Denny.
As we're saying here that the current spaces that we have, that is at gate number 1, what occurred there is that the agents used it as a storage facility to store their containers, so that when they bring back containers to the port, you will have containers stored in chassis. Chassis are what you rest the containers on the wheels, and you pull them along. Now, what we have been doing because of the pressure and the time constraints, we have now had to ask the agents in them to remove all of the equipment out of the port. We've also had to relocate our staff who facilitates delivery at gate number 1. We also had to reposition the agents. We have on the port, there's a container that is occupied by the agents that is used to tally, to gain an understanding as to the containers that leaves the port and the containers that enters the port. So those 2 operations, they have been completed. Also to the whole removal of the agents' facilities at the Port Authority, which we consider as vital, so that the project can actually really, you can see the real actions of the project now will really come to fruition, because the Chinese have started to lay some concrete, and so the project, as we speak, the project has commenced. Okay. That is a reality.
So when you say the agents have removed the equipment outside the port, where they gone?
Well, the agents have had to identify new land area, new landed spaces around the port, because what is happening is that right now the port is cramped for space, and so we cannot afford to have any bottleneck or any agency or any encumbrances that will let's say stop the project from moving forward efficiently.
So do you anticipate, once the project is completed, that these equipment that the agents use as part of the operations will return to the port?
No. Right now, the process is that we have had the agents. There are 2 types of operations in the Port Authority. There's the Lolo operations, that is containers that land and they don't have chassis and they're stored in the stack. Mm-hmm. But the agents themselves has chassis to which they facilitate their customers to move them off the port. Mm-hmm. There are other containers that are called RoRo. These are roll-on vessels that the containers are attached to the chassis and they roll off, and the consignee can take them straight off the port one time. They're also stored in a separate location. Our primary concern is with those Lolo containers, because with the Lolo containers, you have the agent's chassis on the port and the container stored in the deck. And so the challenge that you have is that you have 2 equipment that are most of the time disconnected. So you've had to have, now when the agents remove their chassis off the port, what will happen is that they're now in control of their chassis. So that truckers now coming to the Port Authority will have to go to the agent's location to get permission to use one of those chassis. And when they bring those chassis to collect a container, they now have to carry that container back to the consignee. But when they come back, they can no longer return to the port and bring the chassis and leave it at the port. So when the container comes back, it is lifted off by our stackers, put in the stack, and then that chassis now
is returned to where the agent is.
To the agent's
so
location.
In other words, these locations that the agent equipment are now stored at, these are basically more or less permanent situations, or unless the agent themselves find better, wrong choice of word, find more suitable locations that they would want to make their permanent homes.
And I can answer a bit here. Mm-hmm. They could come back into the port, but they would have to pay the port for use of the space. And so right before that, they just used it. They were inside the port, and it was something that needed to be addressed, but it was allowed to go on, and the time has arrived where we now need to ensure that the proper commercial transactions take place. Right now, we don't have any space to facilitate them. So, as Mr. Denny said, they were asked to find locations. They found locations around the port, most of them, all of them actually right now. And so they've taken out their storage containers, all of their stuff.
So everything for them is out.
Yes. And Petra, if you went into Gate 1 and you saw an open area right next to the roundabout, you would be able to see a very wide area. I mean, if you measure that area We're talking about what, close to 3.5 acres all the way down to the green building.
Let me explain something
Yes.
to you, right? My familiarity with the port ended about 25 years ago. My dad used to be there, right? And when he left, I don't have any reason to go down to the port. I make sure somebody has cleared my goods. So I'm going from that. But apparently, it hasn't changed that much from since then. So my memory is not too far off. Right? Jason is telling me yes. So we really need an overhaul.
Yeah.
All right. Now, another very quick question. This is for Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, how has the security protocols been impacted, and how are they likely to continue to be impacted as we undertake this construction phase?
Well, they will be impacted. Presently, they're not. What will happen though, as the construction starts in the A1 sector, we'll have to limit the amount of traffic that goes back and forth. What we've looked at is redirecting the break bulk cargo. That's the cargo that's delivered from the transit shed.
That's when I come down for my barrel.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're
Well,
gonna-
when I send for my barrel.
Yes,
Sorry.
and we don't come to the port.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll establish alternative gates, and we control the break bulk flow at those gates. The gate that we now know as Gate 1, that's the gate adjacent to the roundabout. That will be just to facilitate container traffic. As it stands now, you'll have container traffic competing with the break bulk traffic.
Because when I finish pay everything, the truck goes up. You take your paper and you go up there, and the truck drives down there.
Exactly.
Boy, Daddy, I remember.
So as it stands now, you'll be competing with the rig drivers. We're separating that operation
Okay.
for two reasons. One, because of the construction, we want to limit the amount of interaction the public will have with the construction site.
Safety
And-
first.
Exactly. And two, we recognize that with the limited space, it's going to create some congestion, so we're separating that. We're proposing to put those gates in the northern perimeter. I know you have some issues with the
East,
direction,
west,
so-
north is south. that way.
Yes.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen who are listening and not watching, I'm pointing off to my left.
Okay, so where the transit shed is now, we're going to break the perimeter on the opposite side of Rat Island. Between Rat Island and
That's where the Coast
transit
Guard.
shed.
That's where the
No,
Coast
no,
Guard
no.
is now.
Think about Rat Island and think about the transit shed. There's a perimeter between Rat Island and the transit shed on the left when you're going westwards.
20 years.
Oh, going on left. Okay,
Yes.
sorry. Yes. So that's on the right hand side when you're
Right.
going.
So we're going to put
Okay,
two gates.
right.
One will be entrance, one will be exit. Primarily.
So right now there's an entrance gate opposite the distillery
No,
thing.
we're
You're
not
going
going-
further down past that.
Yes.
Right. I'm just want to give persons a right. So you're going past that to put in the
Yes.
gates.
Yes,
All right.
that's
Cool.
correct.
Cool.
One will be entrance. The entrance will be on the western side. The exit will be on the eastern side.
Okay.
So when you look at the transit shed, you'll be entering to collect your break bulk pretty much on the western end of the
Right.
transit shed. You'll drive in, come in, collect, and leave.
So the
Um,
shed will not move
No.
for now.
Not now.
So the shed
I think
stays
so.
in place.
Yes,
Is
pretty
it
much.
will it be there long term, or this is just as until the operation the project continues,
Well, it'll be there until the new shed is completed.
which will be on the where the new shed is going to be.
Well, Mr. Telemark has some timelines. I'm sure he'll be
Right,
able to
I can
share.
give you that.
No, I don't want the timelines yet. We're going to come back to the time. I just want to know where the new shed will be.
He explained it. The new shed will be just where that inlet is. by the
Oh yes,
Bison
yes,
Bar.
yes, yes, yes. That's
Right.
true. Yes, I forget. Okay, so now, so in the new scheme of things, we're at Point FM.
Uh-huh.
You come down the road,
Mhm.
and you don't have to go all the way the normal way you go to the port. You just come straight down, and just at the top there
You
you
still
go
have to
into.
make that right on Bay Street. And
Okay.
then, as opposed to going to the roundabout
Right.
to go into the port.
Uh-huh.
You'll
There'll be a
have-
gate before.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, so that's really like for those of you who went to Pentecost Sunday School with Wilfred, if you can remember that, yeah, we're gonna enter somewhere around there. Mr. Telemark, you should know what me talk about because you live here long enough. We're gonna enter somewhere around there to go to the new transit shed. All right, good. Mr. Roberts. No, Mr. Everett Roberts. I forget his two
Everett
Roberts.
Zachariah.
Okay,
Everett
sorry,
Zachariah.
Mr. Zachariah. You know what,
Teacher.
Mr. Zachariah. You know what? Let's forget that. Teacher. I'm kidding, Mr. Zachariah. How
I
are
like
you?
that.
What, you like teacher?
I like that. I love that. In fact, teaching is, something I enjoy doing.
Yeah, back then.
So I consider myself to be.
Back then you did enjoy, but
Of course, I always did.
I was a teenager, so forgive me. Whatever. Yeah. Okay. Ladies of Princess Margaret, you understand where I'm coming from. Yes, Mr. Zachariah, in your capacity now as project manager, tell us what role you will play in this project.
Okay, before I do that, I'd like to give you some background about the structure of the organization. As you know, a Chinese company, CCECC, has been awarded the contract to build the port works. There is also a supervising company that is also from China who will be supervising what they do. And that was a part of the arrangement that had to be made to satisfy the Exim Bank, who is the lending agency. Mr. Telemack also felt that it was wise to have a local team which worked along with that supervising company and also oversaw what that company did. And that's where I come in. I'm a part of the team.
I am so pleased. There are things I can't say on this program, but I am so pleased.
Yes. I'm a part of that team who will be supervising and looking over what that company does. That's the supervising company, the Chinese supervising company, as well as looking at the whole construction as a whole. One thing we must bear in mind is that the project was designed by Chinese, and therefore
with the local input, yes.
Well, with some local input, yes, but predominantly by Chinese using Chinese codes. We are not familiar with the Chinese codes. So we are more familiar with the American codes, the British codes. So what we have to do is to do an analysis of the design which they have done to ensure that what they are proposing is indeed acceptable by our standards.
No. Let's try this again. You have already done that assessment to ensure that the work that has commenced, because remember the work, I was just told by Mr. Telema, just indicated the work has commenced. So you, as our project manager, are so far feared, because if you're not comfortable, you're not going to sleep tonight, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, until you can come back and tell me next Wednesday that you're satisfied.
There are various aspects to the work and the design, and it's done in stages.
Right.
So we ensure that before the actual work is done, that we're satisfied with that stage of the design.
So the stage that just about has commenced, based on Mr. Telemack's intervention earlier, you're satisfied with that?
Yes, we are.
And in terms of, so do you check things like the kind of material that they're using, the strength of the cement, the concrete, those kind of things?
Yeah, we're charged with overseeing the quality of all the works, including whatever testing is required.
Okay. So if Antigua people end up with any issues, we come and look for you. Just want to make sure. We have someone in there that is looking out for us.
That's the reality.
Love it. You have a team, or it's just you alone?
We're formulating a team as we speak now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have no engineering skills, but if you need any other, I don't have any of those skills.
Well,
architectural, anything.
I
don't
think
need somebody to hold your bag.
I think we are going to have to be accounting to the people. So in terms of, getting the word out there, we can use your services to do that.
All right, teacher. I don't have to bother talk to Mr. Telemack again.
Everyone's recruiting.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just need to say this for the record. This program is part of the program for We Are The Ones. I don't want people to think that if Port Authority has not paid for this service. I plan to make this a sponsorship for some other programs, but not this one. Do you think they can hear me? Oh, it's just my audience. It's just my audience, yes. So this really is an attempt to look at the project critically. When I say critically, not negatively, because people like to think critical negatively, so we can get some feedback and share with our public where we are and where we're going. So, Mr. Telemack, oh, sorry, had anything else you wanted to add, Mr.?
Well, yes.
Yes.
I'd like the people of Antigua to understand and realize that what is happening now is like a 1 in 50-year occurrence. Ports are normally designed to have a lifespan of about 50 years, and I think the last port was constructed about 50 years ago. So it has come basically to the end of its life. So what is happening now, most people that are alive now would not have seen a port being constructed. And my understanding is that we are one of, if not the first, in the region to be redoing a fully containerized port. Mr. Telemac, that's correct?
That's very true. At
So
least in this part of the region. And we've had some developments in Jamaica, Santo Domingo, but in the Eastern Caribbean, this is the first port being redone. And I think the break from the traditional port concept is unique to what we're doing, and lots of ports are actually looking at and measuring what we're doing. So we're going to be looked at for sure.
So not only are we upgrading ourselves in terms of our national port services, but we're also probably going to be a benchmark for what happens across the OECS.
A benchmark, and we're also developing our human resources, and you never know, we might be able to export that skill
Service
to another island.
Okay, I like that. Now, you mentioned about developing our human resources, and you also mentioned that the CCEC or CECC?
CCECC.
CECC.
No.
CCECC.
Okay, I've written it down.
It has to be symmetrical.
CCECC. Oh, so it's 5. I thought it was 4. My apologies. All right. So that the CCECC has commenced their operations. Is there scope in this? And one of the concerns among the community has always been, what opportunities will there be for involvement? I don't want to drill right down into it now, but I wanted to just get an overview. That is there scope for employment opportunities, whether direct employment or on a subcontract basis for residents and citizens of Antigua and Barbuda to benefit from this project?
Well, I've heard the Prime Minister indicating that he's very, at the launching, at the groundbreaking, that he was very keen on having, quite a few workers being Antiguan. Mm-hmm. And I think the Chinese ambassador understood what he meant and has made attempts to realize that. As Mr. Telemac had indicated earlier, the first contract was with Spencer's, who made us proud by doing an excellent job. And if we're able to provide that service to them at a good cost, I think it will allow us to get more and more involved in the works.
Okay. Mr. Telemac, anything you want to
Yeah,
add?
I want to speak to a point raised by everyone, and that is from the transfer of knowledge perspective, the human capacity development perspective. First, we are going to have 2 younger engineers working along with Everett. So if you're a young engineer with an interest in the type of construction that we're going to be doing, the opportunity does exist where you could ensure that you provide your information so that it can be looked at. I think
you don't have any young engineers that went to China? Like, we can get some Chinese language.
if that would actually be even perfect, if we had someone who could speak Chinese. As part of this project, we're also going to have some interpreters who will be working with us. And the first one, I think, will be joining us sometime a little bit later this month. And that would be another young Antiguan being engaged in that process as well.
We have a few of those persons from our community that went to China and are back, right? So I'm officially putting in a request on their behalf for them to be considered. I'll just carry on.
Okay, I think you're doing a fantastic job. So from that perspective, we're going to have Mr. Evan Zachariah. Mm-hmm. There are going to be some additional engineers that are going to be part of the port project management team, which we are working right now with the minister who is responsible for the project. That is Minister Weston, and he's putting this whole team together. Mm-hmm. And we've designed the project team. We're going to have someone with some project management skills. We can have 2 engineers that we are bringing on board to gather some experience and some training in the area. We're going to also be looking at everyone himself, who would obviously be advancing himself, immersing into this whole project, so that when it's all over, we have individuals who understand where everything was placed, how things operate, how it flows, and we won't be lost. We can't afford to be lost. So on that perspective, I think there are broad scope for a few individuals to receive some significant opportunities in this project. Secondly, currently, there are a number of Antiguans who are currently working on the job site. They have been working along with the Chinese as they construct their campsite, where they've been constructing it right on the western side of the Dredge Bay playing field, in the back there. There's somewhere upwards of, there's over about 15 or so Antiguans who are employed there every day.
Permit me 1 second. For those who would be familiar, we're talking about the Chinese are now constructing their housing where the basketball court used to be at the back of the playfield. So just so persons get an idea as to what Mr. Telemack is referring to. Continue, Mr. Telemack.
Right. Now, they have actually dug up the existing basketball court, but they're building a brand new one in the middle, and that one is going to be nice as well. So when they're all done there, there'll be a nice basketball court there, and maybe some of the buildings will still be there. So there's some development going in that area. But there are Antiguans working there. We have been receiving a number of individuals who come to the port to speak to the issue of employment, issues of subcontracts or individual contracts themselves. And all those individuals can come to the port. They can sign up their names. Ms. Zachariah is at the front desk. She will take your information, give you applications. And then we have appointed, the government has appointed, as cabinet has appointed, Mr. Khalid Shabazz, and he'll be joining us tomorrow. And he is the one that you engage as it relates to employment opportunities at the job site itself. The minister, Weston, will be signing up the commencement document on Friday. And that will actually launch the full-scale operation, which the Chinese have been waiting for. They've been actually waiting for us to give them A1. That is clearly available to them now. That includes that green building at the corner here that you've been looking at. It used to be a customs bonded facility. It is now empty, and the Chinese have full access to
The
it.
green building?
Yes, straight ahead. If you go outside and look straight ahead, there's a green warehouse sitting there.
Warehouse.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Right. So that is now theirs. They're fixing it up. They're going to use it for storage. In front of it, they're going to put in a batch plant, a concrete batch plant. They're going to put in a few more pieces of equipment. APUA has been quite great working along with us. They have powered up the area they've wired the area with power. We were going to have electricity on the site as of today, but with the storm coming, we've pushed it back a bit. The main water connection was also going to go in today, so that is waiting to be done. But once that's all done, in short order, the number of individuals who have actually signed up for employment will be engaged. Okay. Yes, and Mr. Shabazz, working with the team of people that he has working along with him, will be reaching out to people to come and start this project. It's going to be quick moving. It's going to be high paced. And one of the things that I've noticed is on Saturdays and Sundays when I come down to my office at Dredge Bay, I look across the back and I see most of the Chinese working. Well, one of the things about the Chinese is they work 7 days a week. They work 24 hours if you let them do it. And we ourselves need to sharpen up and start taking advantage of it. And
Curious question now you mentioned that, because I know that the port is unionized. 2 unions, back-to-back, locked in.
Yes.
But the workers at the port are not necessarily going to be involved in the construction phase. Is there anything during the port operations that could impact on the current labor relations that would require the union to get involved? Or are you in, the wrong question. The right question is, have you been in discussions with the union? I think that's an operations question. No, it's a management question. Yeah. Have you been in discussion with the unions so that they are being kept in the loop as regards to what's happening?
Absolutely. We've been engaging with the unions constantly. We've been advising them of what we're doing. As a matter of fact, we started today. We're doing a broad consultation with the staff. I met with the first 20-something staff members for about 2.5 hours this morning. Went through the whole process of some of the changes, some of the difficulties, some of the new things that are going to be in place. I thought they were very engaging. And I think the unions themselves have requested that we ensure that the staff is fully aware. I give them copies of the plan, the construction plan, so they can actually see this phase is first, second, third, so the staff is not left out and wondering. I think it's important that we did that, and tomorrow we're going to continue, Friday we're going to continue, so that we get all of the 250 individuals who work at the port fully clued in on what's going to take place. The unions have also been brought in on the intended plans. We've brought them up to speed on first the initial design. We've brought them in to see the new layout that we're going to be rolling out once the plan is completed. They've seen the videos. They've seen all of the data that we have been shared with them. So the unions are fully engaged in that respect. And I can say that we are not anticipating any issues or challenges from that perspective. We've also had some good feedback from the unions as it relates to the unions themselves advocating to the staff to ensure that the proper health and safety practices are in place. Sometimes you ensure that individuals are fully uniformed with the proper hats, the vests, even the mask, and sometimes the staff doesn't want to use it. And it's going to be necessary that we take all the precautions that we need to, both from the physical as well as the psychological, and also what you breathe, because half the time they complain it's hot, but you need that dust mask if it's very dusty, because then you're going to not be too well if you keep ingesting all of the type of dust that will be created from the construction.
So will those be issues for Mr. Roberts? Jason, will those be issues for you? I know, I suspect, your security protocol will be both internal and external. So in terms of the staff, I noticed you came in your vest. So we know you're taking your business seriously. You're Mr. Denny. But is it that where the whole issue of continuous education, of the importance of being properly attired for your own safety, would that be something that would also be part of your remit?
Well, that's continuous. Security and safety, more often than not, is linked together.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have a health and safety officer as a part of the management team. That's Eduardo Pyle. He's ever visible in the operation. Any issues that come up, more often than not, he's notified first, and then, of course, the information is disseminated. But we all have a responsibility to the safety of the staff and the patrons.
All right, I have a devil's advocate question for Mr. Denny and Mr. Telemac. We have been told many times, in fact, even in Parliament, when the politicians are ready to bash each other, we hear that the port is overstaffed. I'm curious, in terms of this project, is there scope perhaps that workers could perhaps, first of all, given that you are going to be resizing your operations for the period of the construction, I'm using resizing delicately because it could be resizing up or resizing down, is there potential that you could have idle workers as part of the process? And is there scope that workers could perhaps take a leave of absence if they see an opportunity to move over to be part of the construction? So you have a worker, stevedore, who actually has masonry or steel bending skills that potentially are required for this project. And they see an opportunity that they could either improve their skills, get, better opportunity over on the construction side. Is there scope for an internal arrangement where they are, I'm not going to say transfer it because the port will not be paying them, but that now becomes an opportunity for them?
Is that my question?
Yes. You see, Mr. Denny, quickly.
I know, he's passing the buck. First of all, there'll be no downsizing. We're going to maintain the staff complement that we have. As a matter of fact, there's scope for looking at some key areas that we may need to add some individuals. Our technical competence may need to be upgraded in certain areas, and so we are looking at addressing those. As it relates to your question of individuals looking to get time off, more than likely those individuals, especially in the operations side, I would be challenged to believe that they would actually want to do that. Okay. They all seem pretty satisfied where they are. It's a good job. They make decent money, and I don't think that they would be looking to leave that to go do that the construction work. That being said, I think also that having had the opportunity to be gainfully employed, it would be probably prudent to look at reducing some of the unemployment challenges that we have by having individuals who are not employed look for those employments. That does not say that if an individual wishes to actually do that we would be hard and fast against looking at the prospects of engaging in thinking about what should be done. However, I think we have a wonderful opportunity for the individuals at the Port Authority to be gainfully employed and maintain that employment. And if there are additional opportunities with the new development, there are a number of individuals walking up the steps every day looking for Sheldon Zachariah, signing their names to the paper, getting into Khalid Shabazz, and his list is counting. The piles are getting higher. And I think
His
that's...
list can't be getting high. He only coming in tomorrow.
Well, his list is getting higher, believe me, because they're walking in every day, signing up their equipment, signing up themselves, and ensuring that if there's an opportunity, they would like to get it. And I'm hoping that those opportunities can be availed to them.
All right. So you just said, I just want to make it clear. We spoke earlier about some employment opportunities, in particularly the technical and professional ones that would be available directly related to the construction phase. But you're saying that in addition to that, just by virtue of having to do the adjustments to the current operations, that you may need to take on additional staff.
Well,
in certain key areas.
Right. I wouldn't say it exactly the way you said. Well, here's what I'll say. The port has had a very challenging existence. There are lots of individuals who are at the port who are pretty much, who we can all say maintain a certain level in terms of their competence. However, from a technical perspective, there have always been opportunities to look at seeing how we can advance that. Technical being at the, I would say from a mechanic standpoint. We're always looking to see if we could get better mechanics who could add greater capacity there. Now we're looking for individuals to do some particular advancements in our operations and our delivery process, inventory management from a computer perspective. I don't want to say ICT, but knowledge of computers, being able to manipulate the various aspects of computer knowledge. I think those are areas we're looking for individuals who are skilled in those areas, and that we can bring them in. Because as we evaluate what we need to do to respond, we are recognizing too that we need to sharpen our processes, and doing so would require some additional technical skills. So we're looking to see how we fit that. And let me give you an idea real quick. We're looking at the process of improving the speed of delivery. Mr. Roberts spoke about advancing the gates to the west side from where they are now. That process is only going to work if we can push things out of the warehouse quickly and handle the demands of the customers in a more efficient manner. Currently, we use memory entirely to locate goods and serve customers. And so we are quickly. So
what happens if the person with the memory is sick?
Well, then the problem exacerbates. So what we're doing now is we're saying let's transform that quickly to be able to address what's going to come at us. And we're now looking to see how we can design something. We're working with Malcolm Charles, who is the IT, the supervisor, working with Mr. Denny. And we're working with him to see what we can design to fit that. As we do so, the implementation and application that we would require we would need some certain skill levels to do that. I mentioned that to the staff who I spoke to today, asking that if there's anyone who has some of those skills, show up. We want to see you.
So you're looking for what kind of skills?
Yeah, we're looking for some significant trained computer skills in, say, Excel, particularly in Excel. And we're looking for, and we not just want Excel, we're looking at those who can work with macros, put in formulas, and create some of those, interpret formulas, change the interpretation, and fix a problem.
Sounds like some
it.
opportunities from our young persons who have left college with those kind of skills.
Well, we are going to be looking for some of those, and because we're going to need it.
Now you tell me.
Yes.
Now you tell me. Okay, that's all right. Yes, because we have young people, who would have left college, so we can begin to look at some of those as some options. Right.
And the other thing that I want to say too is maybe, and I'm saying this, and I don't want to overspeak, but I was having a discussion with Mr. Richards, that's Kellogg's Richards, and on Saturday along with Mr. Denny. And one of the things that he highlighted, which was very wise too, was We're looking at the broad development, but it appears that there's a likelihood that with the vision that we're having, because remember, we're going to have some folks who are dedicated over at Dredge Bay. The carpool is going to be there, all of the other administrative staff and some operations staff is going to be over there. So there's a likelihood that there might be the necessity to make some adjustments to our role. And if we do, once again, we'll be looking for some capable individuals who would have to have some level of technical competence. And if not all the way, there would be people that we could help advance and bring them up. So there's going to be some opportunities. So we just ask individuals to stay in touch. Look, if you do have some good, exceptional skills in most of the applications, computer applications, you can send us in your application to the HR manager at the Port Authority, and we will explore some of those options.
All right. If we can just shift a little now. We spoke earlier of the agents who have been relocated and so on. Mr. Denny, I'm coming back to you. You have other stakeholders, and you mentioned briefly the truckers. So what is the impact so far of getting ready to relocate for the construction on, for example, customs? You mentioned the truckers in terms of being able to move the goods, but is there any other consideration for them in terms of the operations? Your agents, the truckers, your customs, I don't know, are there any other stakeholder I may be
Yes,
saying?
the Port Authority has been in the process of establishing a committee, and that committee will encompass customs, representatives from the port, representative from the staff, representative from the agents, and the other communities. What we're trying to do is to have a broad-based community, a stakeholder committee, that when we call a meeting, that you have key persons who would be deemed as focal points within the organization, who will go back to transfer the new updates as to what is happening in the at the port in terms of the port development. We have in fact met with stakeholders in terms of importers. We have met with truckers. So I would say that the work is a work in progress, and we continue to engage. This week we're planning to meet with some of our key, Mr. Stanamack has identified, we're looking at about 10 of our top key importers who we want to directly engage to give them a broad overview as to what the likely are the potential changes and how those changes are going to impact their whole operations of import and storage and delivery from the Port Authority. So there is in fact a committee that has been established to facilitate that operations.
Customs
is a part of it. The management of the Port Authority, led by Mr. Telemack, met with the management senior management team of the Customs Department at the Dredge Bay office, and there was a full orientation of the entire process as to what is happening now, what will be happening in the future, and what are the likely impact. And I must dare say that was indeed, that was deeply, it was very, very receptive, because we practically spent from a large part of the morning onto the evening, practically the whole day, that was dedicated to not just showing the project on the screen, but actually there was the physical component to it, whereby we actually went into the yard to identify, one, the demarcation that was set by the Chinese as to where the various boundaries for the various parts of the project, as Mr. Telemaka said, A1 and A3, etc. Also, too, we spoke about the customs facilitation, because the port is responsible for providing space. That's one of the key responsibilities of the Port Authority, to provide space for customs to operate. So in the project now, we have to now be innovative in identifying space as to where the customs would operate from. And we have in fact identified that space. The old executive office, for example, has been identified as a space where we're going to reposition the operations in the yard, that's up in the pen, and the customs officers will be operated in that location, where consignees who have full loads would unstuff their loads right there with their trucks, and they go out the gate. So Mr. Leach and his team will be operating from down west. I hope that we get the direction right. Down west. Also, too, we are looking now to seeing the customs officers being facilitated again in the warehouse. So there, in fact, a lot of things are happening.
So instead of now, they have one central office space. Where
No. Customs is broken up because there is a customs tariff.
Yes, that's true. My
Right.
apologies. Customs
And
tariff
there's
at
customs
the top,
in the
and then down at the
pen,
right.
and you also have customs in the warehouse.
Right.
And also now, because of the advent of the project and the positioning of the cars at Dredge Bay, we'll also be having customs officers stationed at Dredge Bay
Now,
to facilitate
I need you to do
the
something.
management of that car delivery
I need to do
process.
something about that Dredge Bay thing, right? Because my phone has been buzzing. And so before I can walk out of in here when we come tonight, just make it clear to the Point and Villa people, the Point people in particular, that the Dredge Bay facility is a temporary facility.
It is. It is
And that it
absolutely
will be
temporary.
returned to the community
Yes.
once the project is. Let me not say it. One of you, please.
It is absolutely temporary. We are there for a duration until our office has been constructed, at which point we'll move over into our offices.
So
And,
you could potentially move back over before the entire project is completed.
Oh, yes. Yes. The project will take 3 years. We should be out of Dredge Bay within, I would say, about 2 years.
Okay.
And at that point, the Dredge Bay playing field would be brought back to a level where the guys can play football and do their games, albeit there would be a beautiful building on the eastern
I noticed
eastern
the
side.
lights have come down.
That's because of the storm. We were not satisfied that the lights were stable enough.
But I noticed at least 2 of the poles are also down.
No, we actually took all the poles down. Well, 3 of the poles down. We took 3 of the poles down based on the fact that we were not satisfied that it looked secure enough, and rather than have them ended up succumbing to the pressure of the wind, we decided to relieve them of being up there. And so
So they'll be down until.
yes, we're going to do 2 things. First, we took them down. That was the safe thing to do, but we're not going to put them back without putting the proper bases. So Mr. Zachariah, having designed something for us, or he came by and spoke to us about something, is now designing the proper system that would facilitate the proper placements of these tall lights, so that come the next storm, the lights are sturdy enough. We shouldn't have to take them down because they will be well planted.
So this is something that you would actually be working on now, or you
Right
leave
now,
them down
yeah.
until.
We're going to work on building the base for those units right away, because once the storm has gone by and we're putting them back on, remember we're going to have the cars in
So
there
you
as
need
well.
the lights.
So we need the lights. So yeah, so that's an urgent thing. And keep in mind, I'd like the community to understand and I know it's difficult and I know it's tough, but we couldn't find an area that could allow us to serve the public in an efficient manner. We were always going to be under pressure, and so having found an area where the vehicles could be in one space, where we could be in that same space, I think that was in fact a win for the public, a win for the community, a win for us. Also, they've got a beautiful building, and we can sit with them and discuss how we manage it, how we maintain it, and how they benefit from it.
Stands.
And
We need back some stands. We're not going to dwell on that, but we need back some stands. just putting that there.
I hear you. And
Stands, seating.
yes,
Yes.
I hear
Management
you.
is going to be key once you move out, but
Yes.
seating, put that, Mr. Zachariah, design some seating.
I want to highlight something that Denny touched on, though, and that's the truckers.
Right.
I know that sometimes you, in terms of the pecking order of stakeholders, you don't want to think of truckers as being right up there, but I'll tell you, they play a very significant role in terms of what happens at the port. Not only that, but the port impacts the truckers significantly as well when we are inefficient and we don't deliver what we're supposed to do. Part of the reasons why we're asking for the type of technological upgrades to our systems is that we need to serve the truckers better. We believe that the removal of the chassis from the port into the hands of the agents provides a trucker with a better platform to be served more efficiently. Currently, as it stands, a trucker shows up at the port and he waits for 4 hours or 2 hours or 3 hours or however long. trying to figure out how he's going to get service. That is because no one expected him. No one anticipated him. There are things happening, and when you show up, we're not prepared to serve you. As it stands now, because of the booking that they're going to have to make with the agent and with the port, we are expecting them. We are anticipating them. We can preempt their arrival by having the units ready for them. So the truckers who would now have to live with going to the agents would probably be served 4, 5, or maybe 8, 10 times faster when they arrive at the port because of this change.
Has this been discussed with the truckers as well?
Yes, it has been.
And what's the feedback?
I think most of the truckers are happy with what we've discussed with them. But I'm just trying to ensure that there is a broad understanding of what it is we are trying to achieve. As a matter of fact, in every port in the world, this is what happens. You show up, make a booking, you enter the port, they're waiting for you, you get it, and you leave.
You're not helping to look for your container?
Well, yes. And, you have to help. You may also try to find somebody to help you. And that is also a problem. And, we need to improve on that. And so there'll be less engagement with the trucker, but there'll be a more fruitful engagement with the system so that the trucker, knowing what his booking time is, will show up for that time, get served, and go.
I smell productivity improvement here.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, Petra, that if truckers are properly engaged, then you could have a trucker today make his 4 bookings for tomorrow. He could book one for 9, book one for 12, book one for 2, and he doesn't have to come waste his time at the port. He calls, his container is ready, he comes pick it up, and he leaves. We're creating a structure. And then if the structure is working so well, why would you want to go back to the old way? So we're going to continue that with the new system, and it's going to get a lot better with the new system as well.
I have a devil's advocate question for you before I go to Mr. Denny. What about those do you know who I am people who are going to want to break that protocol?
We're going to have one system.
We're not going to have the do you know who I am system.
We're going to have one system.
You sure we're not going to have the do you know? Okay, I've made my point. Mr. Denny, earlier we mentioned the agents and the fact that the agents have relocated, and Mr. Telemac just emphasized the role that the agents will now play. Well, it sounds like the agents getting more work to me. It sounds like, because, and I'm going to say it this way, Mr. Telemac looks puzzled. Bear with me. Right now, as far as I know, the agents give you the release paper and their job is done. So it sounds like the agents are getting more work. Tell me.
What is it getting more work?
Because as far as I know now, the agents, they sign the release paper and the customer is on his or her own. No? How does it work?
No,
now?
in terms of delivery?
In terms of delivery of the...
No, what we are trying to do is to mainstream that.
No. I hear you, but I'm asking you. So as it stands now, once the agent gives off the documentation, do they come back in the process? No.
Can I answer that?
Okay, sir. Okay.
I could answer that. Mm-hmm. For too long, the process has been placed on the port's back.
Mm-hmm.
An agent signs a document, release, and they're done. Customer has paid the agent significant amounts of monies, and the agent's role has been eliminated. And then the port now has to deal with a plethora of issues that just shows up on the port. It has been unfortunate that we've allowed that to happen for as long as it has. But to agree with you, they're going to do a little bit more work, and they deserve to do so because it is their customer. It is their customer. They're not the customer of the port. They're the agent's customer. They paid that agent significant monies to be able to get their goods, and you can't divorce yourself from that process. Therefore, the agent.
So we are going to be having the agents now as re-engaging with their customers on another level.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, Mr. Denny, permit me to come back to you. How have the agents responded? I'm assuming you've had this dialogue with them already.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And what has been their response to staying more engaged with the process?
I think that the agents are very much, they are very overwhelmed because this is absolutely unprecedented, whereby you have a deeper engagement of the agents, with the port management and the broader port authority as a whole, because there may have been a disconnect years ago, but at this critical point, in this critical juncture in our history, what has been happening, there's been a positive outreach by the port management to engage the agent, not just the agents, but engage the carriers, because at the end of the day, the principals are key stakeholder in the entire process. So we engage both the agents, we engage the principals, because anytime that there's an equipment that is down or any problems, we at the port, we hear not only from the agents, but we also hear from the principals as well. So we have reached out in a significant way, and that's why I believe that this project is going to have significant benefits for the agents and for the carriers, because as Mr. Telemark pointed out, one, we enhance our capabilities at the port, whereby increase berthing capabilities, our capacity is increased. We also will have a greater land use efficiency, because as you said, that the warehouse occupies a critical part of our real estate. That is out of the way. So we have a better land management, space management at the Port Authority, and we also have greater predictability. What the carriers want more than anything else is that when they show up, they can know, I'm going to spend 4 hours, 8 hours in Antigua, and I'm gone. They don't want to hear that they come to Antigua and there's a heightened levels of worries and securities and bellyaches. So the new port, as a matter of fact, I would venture to say, even before the new port, we have started that process whereby Antigua, in terms of our operational capabilities, we now serve as the port by which the agents and the carriers use as the backup for the catch-up. So that time lost at other ports, they can come to Antigua Port Authority because of how we operate with our crane and equipment. They can come here, yes.
Now?
Yes.
Now or in the future?
No, right now, because when our crane is actually up and functioning, we can now, our productivity rates are much better in a lot of the other islands. So that time lost at other ports, you can actually regain your time here at the port when we have our crane at full functionalities, and that is a critical advantage.
Yeah, don't tell us the consumer, the citizens this, so we can be proud. That's a proud phrase. The backup for the catch up at the port of Antigua.
You like that?
Anyways,
you can make a song on that.
Here is the thing, now, gentlemen.
Yes.
Now our audience are not familiar with this as yet, but I'm going to let them know that. But because there's so many issues, we have a part 2.
Yes.
Tomorrow, back to back. And I might release Mr. Denny, maybe. But Mr. Zachariah, Teacher Zachariah, there are some issues relating to the actual construction that I've been making note of separately that we will go into fulsome. So you're getting a little light day today in terms of overall, but there are some issues. I'm not giving you them in advance. Don't look at my paper. Look at them. When you give me tests, you never give me in advance. Right. And so I will just letting you know that you're not completely off the hook, and I want my audience to know that tomorrow, Mr. Telemark, I'm giving you an earlier hour that we have from 2 to 4 tomorrow. So look at your schedule, right? And you promised me some other people.
Yes, they'll be
we'll
here.
negotiate. All right, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of, I know we spoke about it again, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to We're the Ones on Point FM, and we are speaking about the St. John's Port Redevelopment Project. I have with me Mr. Telemark, the General Manager, Mr. Denny, I got it right this time? Yes. Yeah. Mr. Denny, the Operations Manager, Mr. Roberts, my villa neighbor, as the
Security Manager.
No.
PFSL.
See you, God. All right. For now, I'm going to say the Security Manager because it's a fancy. The Port Facility Chief. Got it. Right. And we have my former teacher of one of those subjects that I didn't do so well in, Mr. Zachariah, who is the project manager, who we'll hear from in much more detail tomorrow. Mr. Roberts, as we look to because we're just about 5 minutes to go. We're looking to wrap up today, and I just want to get a few things in. Customers of the port, especially those of us who clear a barrel every 3 months. I'm sure we have those customers who do their break bulk cargo but are familiar with the operations. Now hearing, whether here in the papers, on other media, that changes are afoot. What do they need to take into consideration as they come down to the port is there anything that they need to take into consideration, or they just need to show up and they'll be guided through the process? There's a seamless guide through the process.
Well, before I answer that, let me just speak to the efforts that we're making with the agents. What we want to encourage, that when the customer shows up for their release, that they confirm right there and then when that container will be open. What has been happening in the past, that we have customers actually collecting the reels, showing up at the port, and it's maybe 1 or 2 days before the container has been opened. So we're encouraging the agents to assist us where that is concerned. We've had dialogue with them, and they've embraced it thus far. That will help to reduce the unnecessary waiting, one, and our liabilities, because you have persons actually there waiting for a day for their
What is it waiting? They're sitting down at the port?
They sit, yeah, pretty much. Sitting and
so
waiting.
So would it be
outside.
Possible, this is me thinking ahead, devil's advocate, whatever gate you have where the customers are entering, the break bulk, because you said you're separating the entrance, would it be possible at that gate that you would be able to tell them, okay, I'm here to collect my goods from Tropical that came in from Timbuktu on date X25. Can you tell them right there and there? Well, you don't need to go any further because this one is not and stuff.
Well, my grandma used to tell me that I'm too previous. So right now you're being previous.
Sorry.
We're working with the IT department as possibly putting up a monitor. The monitor would highlight those containers that
like
are
at the airport?
Yes, yeah,
like
cool.
At the airport. I like that.
For information purposes. So, I mean, even if it's convenient for you to come at 6 o'clock, just to drive by before the port opens, you can actually look at the monitor and determine whether or not your container has been unstuffed.
And we can probably take that on social media as well. So I can look and see. That's an option.
I know Mr. Telemac has spoken with Malcolm about even making that information available on the website.
Oh, nice.
But we also discussed how many persons are actually looking at the website, looking at Facebook.
We're not looking. We're not looking because there's no information.
All right, but we also we discussed the community notices, forums such as this, where we can actually sensitize the public to that information. We're looking at Christmas burial and the challenges that we know we've had in the past, looking at an environment that's going to be shrunk to about 50% or a little over that we had before.
Note to self, no Christmas burial this year.
So we're sat with customs. I know customs is looking at it as well. So we're trying to find innovative ways to maintain that 100% service to the public in the small environment. So as Mr. Telemac, we're leaning towards technology. If it means initially we look at Point FM, helping us to spread the word, the other media houses, Facebook, our website, or even that monitor.
The
outside.
monitor. I think I like the idea of that monitor. I mean, at the very least, if I do come and I didn't see it anywhere else, I know I don't have to go inside and spend an hour or something while I figure out what is going on.
The low-tech approach has been used for the last $2 barrels, where we have customer service agents, for if you want to call them that. We have clerks who actually meet the customers outside. They actually go through a list, and right then they can tell them if their container has been unstuffed.
So I can tell you for sure I don't know about this, because the barrel come and somebody. Let me take this opportunity to thank Mr. Asker for providing my services.
I want to just speak to this again, because the question you asked speaks to the role of the agent more than anything else.
Yes.
And Mr. Roberts sort of touched on it, but I want to stress it. And I want to stress it in a pointed manner, because it has been, from my perspective, for too long that the agents have abdicated their roles to the Port Authority. And here's what I mean by that.
Mr. Telemac, you said that already.
Well, let me explain to you what that means, because here's what it means. An agent's container is not unstuffed without their knowledge and presence. Therefore, it is critical.
Yes, we're getting the notice that we're out of time.
Yes.
Give us 2 minutes, and then we'll be out of here.
And this part is one that I need to make. It is critical that the agents communicate to their customers when they should go to the port. Stamping the release, okay to release, does not mean that the cargo is ready. But guess what, folks? The agent knows that, because it is they who unstuff their containers with us. So sending it on with a stamped document to the port when they know they have not unstuffed the container is in fact forcing you to endure unnecessary frustration difficulties.
Killing productivity,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons why we're upgrading the
So
port.
I'm employing the agents. When you stamp release, let the customer know to call me back to find out if we haven't stuffed.
So
your
why do
card.
agents just don't hold the releases until the container is open? Just a thought.
They want to get paid, and so when they get paid, they're happy. But after you get paid, you still have a commitment to the individuals to which who have paid you, and to lose them on the port really puts them in a real bad position. So if the agents take some time to coordinate with their customers when they should go to the port, that eases the pressure on us as well. So I believe that one step needs to be added. Before you go to the port, call the
Let's
the
get a
agent.
system in place
Yes.
that lets you know where your goods are. On that note, though, I just want to thank all of you today for your time with us today. Like we anticipated, this is a discussion that needs a bit more time, and I want to thank Kenny in advance. He's agreed to lend us an hour of his time tomorrow, which is 3 to 4. So we'll be here at 2. Some of the things that we'll be touching on tomorrow will be the environmental issues that will be linked to the whole construction process, the actual construction process, going a bit more into that, the quality assurance issues that may arise. We will also be looking at, this one came in while we were talking, the historical significance. Are we making any efforts to things that we would have dug up, and anything that we could come across that could be of cultural and historical value for us as a people? I got a message when we said we cut up the boats and moved them. Somebody wanted to know what boats, what period, what names of the boats. So those are some of the issues that we may want to consider, and then dwell a little bit more on the human capacity. So those will be, so we're looking more into the construction. So I'm not sure, Mr. Roberts, unless you're into the construction area in terms of security, if you might want to come back.
I look forward to music tomorrow.
You look forward to listening to us, you mean,
Yes.
tomorrow. Mr. Denny, I think we may need you back just for 1 or 2 operational matters. We'll probably get him out of the way early, and then I will release you. But Mr. Telemac, for sure, you'll be back tomorrow. Teacher Zachariah will be back tomorrow. We're not going to ever discuss that subject, no. And you will have some more additional personnel.
Yes.
All right? So I want to thank our listenership for staying with us for the 2 hours. It has been a very intense session. Oh, and we'll also be looking at the impact on Rat Island. Yes, I forgot to have that there. Yes. So we will continue this discussion tomorrow. Yes, Mr. Roberts, you get a pattern shot. My Rat Island was a pattern shot, right? And I want to thank you once again for coming, ladies and gentlemen. This has been We're the Ones. Today we featured representatives from the Antigua Port Authority as we seek to discuss the St. John's Port Redevelopment Initiative. For those of you who may have any things you want to have, questions you want aired, just finally, there will be a town hall meeting on September the 27th. We will go a little more into that again tomorrow so that persons can know where the questions that you have for us here that we're not taking, you can write them down, make a note of them, and go to the town hall meeting and get your questions answered. We're the Ones over and out. Have a good evening.
The sweet and jumpy when the bandmen appear, everybody jumping away. They will jump and whine and call for more, jumping up to the sweet tempo, all the while the officials making it. Trouble is the bandmen and the calypsonian, strutting after Carabao.